Now for a game which demonstrates some of black's possibilities for playing for a win in the symmetrical structure arising after d takes e5, d takes e5. This is between Harikrishna and Ivanchuk from the World Team Championship in 2011, and started with a modern defense. So here's c6, or d6 rather. White played knight c3 and knight f6. Black playing for e5 very frequently arises in these modern type structures. So had a game with Alberto David in a tournament in Nancy in January of this year, which proceeded along similar lines. I'll just show you the first few moves of that. Knight f3, d6, h3, knight d7, a4, queen c7, bishop c4, knight gf6, queen e2, castles, and now black played e5, which is his standard reaction, and after d takes e5, David decided to exchange one pair of knights, and after rook d1, a5, the position is probably balanced, maybe very slightly better for white. Ultimately, I went on to get a winning position, but then messed up and only drew. But e5 is a move which is very typical for black in these lines, and we see the same thing happening here. So Ivanchuk picks this slightly unusual move with queen c7 in place of knight bd7, but we'll see that it has certain ideas. So after bishop e3, e5, takes, a5, he develops his bishop immediately to g4, and yeah, it's very interesting how Ivanchuk manages to outmaneuver a really excellent opponent and create some difficulties from what appears to be a completely innocuous position. So White started with bishop c4, rook d8, queen e2, queen e7, h3, and now bishop takes f3, queen takes f3. The white bishop pair is ultimately an asset, but it has to be balanced against the advantages of black's position, which include that this knight can aim quite conveniently for d4, and white is going to have to do something relatively passive to stop that. We'll also see that Ivanchuk has a very interesting plan in mind for activating his g7 bishop, which is a little passive at the moment. So white now played knight b1 in part to prepare moving his pawn to c3 to anticipate knight d4. But after knight b1, b5, this exchange left black in possession of the a file, and also with more useful possibilities on the queen side in terms of playing b5. So to c3, b5, bishop d3, queen f8 demonstrates Ivanchuk's idea. So he wants to bring this bishop to h6 to challenge white's dark square bishop, and ultimately would seek to leave white with a bad bishop on d3. So bishop g5 temporarily prevents that, but now h5 and bishop h6 is coming, and yeah, I mean the position looks roughly level, but certainly black is the one who is generating the threats and generating the opportunities. He now plays c5, so liquidating the queen side and restricting his possibilities to only the king side, but retains quite an imposing position even with this. So queen takes b5. cb4, cb4. After queen takes b4, it's probably simplest for black just to play rook b8 with a transposition rather than get involved in this, which doesn't quite seem to work from black's perspective. But after cb4, rook b8, queen c4, rook takes b4, and black is certainly the one pressing. If we look at these two pawns, we see that the white e pawn is under attack, and under attack from a number of pieces, including that the d2 knight is itself attacked, whereas the e5 pawn is quite secure. And after queen c3, queen c5 takes. There's a certain amount of risk for white in this position. He played knight f3, so now black gets his desired position with a bad bishop on c2. After knight f d7, rook d1, king f6, knight d5, rook c4, bishop d3, check, and rook d1. Yeah, here Marin suggests king g7 with a view to playing knight f6, which ultimately it seems would have left black with some winning chances. Although with all of the pawns on one side of the board, white should be able to make a draw. But instead, after rook d1 and this trade, there wasn't a huge amount going on, and after another few moves, the players agree to draw here. So a game which doesn't seem to have a huge amount to it, but at the same time Ivanchuk was pressing reasonably hard with black against an extremely strong player. And I think that some of the interesting things about it are the difficulty which white had in really proving the superiority of his bishop pair in the symmetrical structure after d takes e5. And also black's ideas of trying to bring a knight to d4, activating his bishop via h6, and ultimately playing, or seeking to play a position against a bad light squared bishop.